Good morning, Mosaic. If you do me a favor right now and take out your connection card, it's either on the seat that you are sitting on if you're in the front row, or in the seat pocket in front of you if you're sitting somewhere else in the room. We'd love for you to fill that out. We're going to collect that at the end of the service when we pass the offering bags. If you are a first-time guest with us, we're really excited you're here. We don't want you to put that in the offering bag, though. Instead, after the service, we have a free gift for you. If you take your connection card to the pillar in the lobby, as soon as we're done, we'll give you a free t-shirt and connect with you there. Jesus said in John 14, verse 12, I tell you the truth, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done and even greater works. Jesus says we will do greater works than he did. That's a pretty audacious claim. But we get caught up in the normal, the routine, the settling, the average life. Or another way you could say it is we get caught up in the average life. Nervous laughter in the room on that. Don't look at my belt loops. We don't want the average life, right? We want the greater life. So I want to review real quickly where we've been in this series. We started off by talking about burning the plows, that we need to get rid of our backup plan and sell out to following Christ. We talked about digging ditches. Sometimes before God will do what is easy for him and send rain in the dry spots of our lives, we need to do what's difficult for us and dig some ditches to hold the water he'll send. We said that upon further review, no faith is wasted. God takes what is broken in your life and will use it for good because he is wise, he is loving. And last week I asked, what do you have? Jesus doesn't care what you're not. Jesus doesn't care what you don't have. He created you in a certain way. He wants to use who you are. And when you pour all of you out before God, he will multiply your impact exponentially and miraculously. But here's what's nagged me this series. Every week of this series has gone well. This is actually the highest attended series in the history of Mosaic. We have a record number of people watching the webcast. We've had 2 baptisms. You seem to be tracking with me each week. But here's what's nagged me. Are we doing it? See, the nightmare scenario for any preacher is that you come in here and Sunday's great, but when people leave the facility, they also leave behind the information and the inspiration. Are we doing it? On the first week, we gave you a pack of matches as you walked out. Did you burn something? We talked about digging ditches. Are you doing the thing that only you can do so you'll be ready when God acts? When you were convicted of the part of your life that you keep off limits to God, are you letting him in? Information without application is an abomination. In fact, Jesus complains once, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Are we doing it? Are we pursuing the greater life, or are we average? In this series, we've been following the life of Elisha. So to wrap up this series, we're going to look not at the end, of Elisha's life. We're going to look at the beginning of his ministry. After Elisha receives his calling, there comes a moment where he has to decide, am I going to do this, or am I going to settle? So whether today is your first time with us or you've been coming for a few years, today can be a moment where you decide, I am not going to settle for the average life. I'm going to achieve something greater that God has in store for me. Let's get in the story. 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 1. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, and remember, Elijah is the mentor of Elisha. Elijah and Elisha were traveling from Gilgal, and Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has told me to go to Bethel. But Elisha replied, as surely as the Lord lives and you yourself live, I won't leave you. So they traveled together to Bethel. Now, 3 times in the story, Elijah says to Elisha, I'm going here, I'm going somewhere else, you stay here. And each time Elisha responds, no, I'm going to go with you. We're not going to read all those, we'll skip ahead, verse 7. 50 men from the group of prophets also went and watched from a distance as Elijah and Elisha stopped beside the Jordan River. Now, the Jordan River has great significance for the people of Israel because when the people of Israel had left the nation of Egypt as slaves, they eventually come to the Jordan River. And as soon as they cross that river, they're going to be in what God has told them is the land promised to them, the promised land. And so when they get to that river, Joshua leads them across in dramatic fashion. He steps into the water, the priests go in, and the water stops flowing, so the entire nation walks across the Jordan River on dry ground. And it was actually reminiscent of what God had done at the Red Sea to the generation before them. When God, through Moses, led the Israelites out of Egypt and slavery, they came to the Red Sea. They were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh and his Egyptian army. But then God parted the the waters of the Red Sea so they could walk across on dry ground. So Elijah and Elisha now come to the Jordan River. And you have this other group of prophets watching to see what will happen. Then Elijah folded his cloak. Last time we saw Elijah do something with his cloak was the first week of the series. He took his cloak off of him and put it onto Elisha to symbolize, I'm putting the mantle of my responsibility, the mantle of my ministry on your shoulders now. Then Elijah folded his cloak together and he struck the water with it. The river divided and the two of them went across on dry ground. And just as Moses had led Israel out of slavery through the parted waters of the Red Sea, and just as Joshua had led Israel into the promised land across the Jordan River on dry ground, now Elijah is leading Elisha across the Jordan River on dry ground into the promised land of a greater calling. When they came to the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I'm taken away?" He knows their time together is short. And Elisha replied, "Please let me inherit a double portion, a double share of your spirit and become your successor." "You've asked a difficult thing," Elijah replied. "If you see me when I'm taken from you, then you will get your request. But if not, then you won't." So what he's saying is, I want to be in ministry like I'm your firstborn son, because in the Jewish law, the firstborn son would receive a double portion of the father's inheritance. And so he says, just as that's true with money and a family situation, I want that to be true spiritually between me and you. And Elijah's response is kind of weird. He says, if you see me when it happens, you'll get that, but if not, then you won't. Maybe he's just testing his resolve, his perseverance, we don't know. As they were walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separating them, and Elijah was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, I see the chariots and charioteers of Israel." And as they disappeared from sight, Elisha tore his clothes in distress, a sign of mourning. And then there's a quiet peace, but a dramatic moment ensues. Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak, which had fallen when he was taken up. And if this was a movie, I picture the drums beating and the music crescendoing. He struck the water with Elijah's cloak and cried out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" He's not asking, does the God of Elijah exist? He's saying, God, show your power through me, just as you did through Elijah. Then the river divided, and Elisha went across. I wonder what that walk across the dry river was like. He's just lost his mentor. He's been enabled to see some kind of spiritual force, maybe an angel driving this chariot of fire. He has the mantle of responsibility of God's spokesman for an entire nation placed upon him, and he turns the river into dry ground. What was that walk like? Did he walk with quiet determination? If God did this, I know we'll do more. Did he stop halfway across and look back, knowing his life would never be the same? I wonder, did he hesitate? He knew he was following in the footsteps of Moses and Joshua, great leaders in the faith. Did he know that once he crossed, there was no going back? I wonder if he even laughed about it, like, of course God would part the waters, just like him. When the group of prophets from Jericho saw from a distance what happened, they exclaimed, "Elijah's spirit rests upon Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. They all knew Elisha was God's man and was going to be used in dramatic ways. Elisha goes on to perform twice the miracles that Elijah does, pretty much proving that he had the double portion of Elijah's spirit on him. But the dramatic moment wasn't when the prophets came and bowed down before him. The dramatic moment was not even when he crossed the water. The The dramatic moment was when he was standing next to the river, and all he has is the water, and Elijah's cloak is on the ground right next to him. He picks it up, and he rolls it up. And then he strikes the water in an act of faith. Now think about this. He has 50 people watching. If nothing happens, this is going to be embarrassing. His own faith would have maybe gone away if he tries to do this and nothing happens. But he has the courage to say, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And he strikes the water and he walks across the dry ground of promise to the land of something greater. And today I want to challenge you to strike the water. Pick up the cloak of the life God has called you to, strike the water that is keeping you from the greater life, and walk across to the land of God's promises. So there's two takeaways I want you to decide to do as you decide to strike the water. Number one is this: cancel the audition. Cancel the audition. You know, auditions are pretty scary things because you're putting yourself out there so other people can judge you and maybe condemn you or maybe accept you. In fact, Ben Alston, who leads our band, the most difficult part of his job is when he does auditions. You have to audition to be in the band or sing, and he has people come to him to do that on a semi-regular basis, and he doesn't ever have anybody come who's horrible, and so it's just really tough to figure out, are they just good, or can they really take our band to another level that we've never been before? And there's, it's just a gray area. There's no fine line there. But imagine, if you will, that one of our band members, let me just pick on Bobby Jackson. Bobby's not playing our band today, but Bobby's a professional musician. He plays guitar for us. He plays drums for us sometimes. What if Bobby comes up to Ben in the lobby after church and he's like, "Hey, Ben, I need to talk to you." And Ben would say, oh, okay, what's up? Imagine Bobby saying, "Well, I really, I think I want to audition for the band." And Ben would probably be confused and say, I don't understand, Bobby. You're in the band. You already auditioned. He's like, I know that happened before, but I really feel like I need to audition again. And, I don't know if I'm still good enough or what you think of me or if I should just still do this anymore. So can we set up another audition? And Ben would just look at him and say, "Bobby, you only have to audition once. You're one of our best musicians. You're not going to audition again, and don't even think of quitting. Don't be dumb." That would just be foolish. But the weird thing is that even though God has already chosen us, a lot of us act like we are constantly auditioning for the part. We go through our lives questioning, am I good enough for this? I'm not sure I can do that. I probably shouldn't have that kind of dream. Now understand, there will be opposition, but it won't be from God. One group that will oppose you is people. All around you are those who are still content with the ordinary, and they're wondering why you aren't anymore, and you will be tempted to rejoin them. They are the critics and eye rollers who don't mind saying you're crazy to believe that God can use your life in a great way. These are the people who will brazenly tell you that you have no business breaking out of their own well-engineered expectations for you. It's the negative friend who is constantly pointing out life's limitations rather than God's possibilities. The controlling boss who'd rather keep you running like an effective cog in the system than threaten his status quo. The jealous coworker who's trying to undermine you at every turn. The overbearing parents who would rather impress their dreams on you than you pursue your own. Maybe you need to go back to the podcast we had from December and re-listen to our How to Hug a Vampire series because you need to put up some boundaries in your life. Maybe you need to put up some fences that delineate, you can't come over here. I will help you. I will have a healthy relationship with you, but you can't get in the way of me doing the greater thing God has called me to do. In addition to people, you'll face an army of distractions and competing ideas, values, interests, and events. You will have life's daily demands have a strong downward pull into the tyranny of the ordinary. And behind it all is the one the Bible calls the adversary, the one the Bible calls Satan. Now, whenever you say Satan, people get a little weirded out because we don't really understand him or know much about him. I mean, is that a guy in tights with a red cape and a pitchfork or something? The best understanding of Satan I have ever encountered is from an author named C.S. Lewis in a book he wrote called The Screwtape Letters. And this is a fictional account. C.S. Lewis made it up, but it's a creative look at a demon named Wormwood who is getting advice on how to handle his patients. And his patients are those who follow Christ. And it's creative in the work in that Satan isn't boisterous and bold in making himself known. No, instead he specializes in not being seen, in planting questions and placing distractions. One of my favorite quotes from the book says this: "Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts." See, Satan is the master of mediocrity. If you try to follow Jesus into the greater life, you will find yourself surrounded. You're going to feel like a lone island of God-inspired greatness surrounded by a sea of normalcy and complacency. So stop trying out for the part God has already given you. There will be a tendency to prove you're greater. God has called you to change the sphere of your influence, to break the generational bondage. He who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it. In the Bible, a man named Jeremiah was called to a very difficult ministry, and God told him, "I chose you and set you apart before you were ever born." And God says the same thing to you. God chose you before you ever did anything bad or great. So he chose you not based on your potential, so it must be based on his potential working inside of you. Cancel the audition. This week, my son woke up in the middle of the night, which was kind of weird. He never does that ever. And it was like 3 a.m. or something, and he just kind of starts screaming and hyperventilating. And my wife and I both woke up, and she got up first, so I just kind of let her handle it. But I could hear their conversation very clearly from the other room because my son is just freaking out and spazzing. And he's crying, and Lindsay goes in and says, "What's wrong? What's wrong, buddy?" And he says, "You told me on my birthday," which was 2 weeks ago, "that I could have iced tea," which was true. Before his birthday, I don't know if we'd been at Chick-fil-A or somewhere, we had iced tea, Lindsay and I had, and he had asked for it, and we said, "Buddy, you know what? We don't let him drink caffeine, but on your birthday, you can have iced tea." And he said, "And you didn't give me iced tea on my birthday." Which is true, because we have filled him up with Diet Mountain Dew, which is way better. But for some reason, he thinks of this in the middle of a deep sleep at 3 a.m. It causes him to start bawling and tears rolling down his face and him hyperventilating and can't breathe and he has to scream out. So my wife gets out of bed and goes and he tells her about this big problem in his life. And so she tries to calm him and say, "Listen, we'll get you some iced tea. Can we do it tomorrow?" And he's like, "Okay." And he goes back to sleep. I mean, he could have at least waited till 8 a.m. to tell us, come on, son. But you do that exact same thing. And I do that exact same thing. Because God's asked me to rest in him and have peace in his promises. But sometimes I just freak out and spaz on God and say, "God, are you going to do what you said? You going to take care of me? Because I'm not sure I can trust you well." Listen, stop trying out for the part God has already given you. Live out your part wholeheartedly. You have 2 choices. You can cross over in the face of fear, or you can stay on the other side and live in ambiguity. And 1 step is all it takes. So cancel the audition. And then second thing I want to leave you with this series is stay close to the guide. In this story, Elisha struck the water with Elijah's cloak and cried out, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And remember, he's not saying, "Where is he?" Like, I'm not sure he's going to show up, or I'm not sure I believe in him. In a way, he's calling God out. He's saying, "God, you're the Lord of Elijah. We saw you do great things through him. I'm calling on you to be the one on whom I lean in both good times and bad. Now show your power here so I know you are with me and you will deliver me no matter what. Now make yourself known." Psalm 48, verse 14 in the Bible says this: He's our God forever and ever, and he will guide us until we die. Even though God has told you what to do in the Bible, you can't get there on your own. But Jesus promised he will send a guide. He will send someone to comfort who will come and live inside of you. And it's his Spirit. It's what the Bible calls the Holy Spirit. And some of us need to stay close to the guide because we're kind of wandering away. Others of us need to follow the guide in the first place. See, it's the power that raised Christ from the dead that is going to guide us and lead us to greater things. Do you have that power? Because once you have that power that raised Christ from the dead, there is nothing that God wants to do in you that is impossible. Jesus wants to give you new life. Jesus was dead, but the power of God gave him new life. And if you are dead in your soul, God wants to give you new life. And it's by encountering the risen Christ that this will happen. See, I said this a couple weeks ago, but don't think that this greater series is some self-help series where, yes, we just get excited and sing an inspirational song and we go do the greater thing. It is only by God's power at work inside of us that you will achieve the life you're destined for. And there's a foreshadowing of what needs to happen with you at the end of Elisha's life. 2 Kings 13, verse 20, Elisha died and was buried. That's all it has to say about the death of Elisha, not very dramatic. But then it says, Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. Once while some Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders, so they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. There was something so powerful about Elisha that when death rubbed against his bones, God brought new life. And in the same way, Jesus died so you could have new life. And if you would just touch the power that raised Christ from the dead, you will be forgiven, you will stand clean, and that's called grace. Now, why do we talk about this all the time? Because this is what we're about. The mission of the church is to lift up the message of Jesus. It's why we are a church for people who don't go to church. Lots of organizations can serve the poor. Lots of organizations can go on mission trips. Lots of organizations can have a prom for people with disabilities. But the church exists to let you know that grace is available in the person of Jesus. And if your life touches his, you will get new life. Several weeks ago, one Sunday during this series, one of our volunteers came up to me after the service in the lobby, and he said, "Hey, Carl, can we talk for a minute?" And I could tell by his expression that he didn't want to talk about the Ravens game. So I said, "Yeah, why don't we go back into my office?" So we went back, closed the door, and as soon as we closed the door behind us, he just lost it. He started crying. And through his tears, he confessed to me an addiction to pornography. And he had been carrying this as a secret for a year. He'd not told anybody. And he said, "Carl, it's like I've been carrying this big weight, and it's just literally weighing me down. That's what I've felt like for the past year." And I've had many guys at Mosaic confess something similar to me. So we had a good conversation and talked through it, and he was a broken man. But at the end of our conversation, he asked, "Listen, Carl, one of the reasons I didn't want to confess this to you is because I serve here and I love this church more than anything, and I didn't want to have to step down. Can I still serve here?" And I could tell by the expression on his face, he thought I was going to say no. And I said, "Yeah, you can still serve here. Listen, our name is who we are. It's what we are. We're a mosaic of broken people. And if we shut out everyone who has brokenness in their lives, then no one will be allowed in our building." And I tried to lighten the mood a little bit because he was still pretty emotionally overwhelmed, and I said, "I'd actually be more likely to ban you from serving if I'd found out about this before and that you were keeping a secret. Then I'd said, listen, if you're keeping a secret and not being honest, then we can't help you, so you can't serve here." And I thought that would make him laugh, but just made him cry more, and he's like, so kind of backfired. But I think he understood what I meant. In October, I went on the Mosaic mission trip to Ireland to serve a church plant over there with the Orchard group, the same group that helped Mosaic get started. And the church plant is called Elevate, and we did some advertising and outreach stuff for them. And they really got in the habit of weekly services, kicked off in January. And I heard a story from their first service. After the service, it was kind of like in here, people came in, sat down, they did a couple songs and a message from the Bible, and then everyone was leaving. But as everyone was leaving or, kind of mingling elsewhere, there was one woman who was sitting kind of down front who didn't move. And she had tears streaming down her face. And she was just kind of staring off into space by herself. She was sitting there alone. And so Dermot, the lead pastor, went up to her and said, "Excuse me, can I help you? Do you need to talk to anybody?" And without making eye contact, still just staring off into space, tears still streaming down her face, she said, "I've gone to church my entire life, and I've never understood. It's just so simple." And that's why that church is there. And that's why this church is here, is to help you understand it's just simple. Jesus said, "I'm the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying." This is a place of grace. When you reach the place that you can't carry the burden of your secrets, Jesus offers grace. When you're dead inside, Jesus offers grace. When you think people there would never accept somebody like me, Jesus offers grace. When you think, "God, I'm not even sure I want to believe in you," Jesus offers grace. When you're broken, Jesus offers grace. And some of you had a time in your life where you lived in grace, but you walked away from the greater life, and Jesus says to you, "Come home." Some of you have never come home. And on your connection card, you need to flip over on the back and check that box that says baptism, because you need to be washed. You need to be clean. You need to physically represent what's going on in your soul. Now, this series has borne a lot of fruit. I've heard a lot of cool stories about how God has been acting in your lives. And I appreciate the emails you send me telling me how God is working on you through Mosaic. And I want to give you one resource that you can use to go farther with this. I get sermon ideas from a lot of different places. I got the idea for this series based on a book called Greater by a guy named Stephen Furtick. And he covers a lot more of Elisha's life that we don't have time to. So if you want to get more into it, I'd recommend you pick that book up on Amazon. And I want to wrap up this series by reading a short passage from the conclusion of that book. Here's what it says. One day, God raised the stakes for Elisha. For each of us, there comes a time when we can't just live out of the abundance of faith instilled in the great men and women who have gone before us. We have to walk in faith for ourselves. We have our own work. We have our own gifts. We have our own step of faith to take. Right now, you are in the same place Elisha was on that historic day by the river. You're standing at the crossing point to your future. You don't have a school of prophets watching from a distance. Most likely for you, standing at some distance is your very own cast of parents, friends, aunts and uncles, co-workers and spectators, maybe a spouse, maybe children, all waiting for you to take your place. They're waiting for you to do the thing only you can do by the power of God's Spirit. They're waiting for God to touch them through you, even if they don't know it yet. Don't test the water. Don't tap the water. Don't put your toe in the water. Strike the water. You didn't get here by accident. The hand of God is on you right now, right here, and this is your moment. We've looked at the inspiring stories from Elisha and others who have set out to pursue their greater calling, and the guarantee for you is the same. Whenever you do what God has called you to do, in any situation, in any given moment, He will do something greater. Jesus said in John 14, verse 12, "I tell you the truth, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done and even greater works." So Mosaic, let's strike the water. Are we doing it? Let's strike the water. Let's pray and then let's worship. Father, I pray for the people in this room. I pray that the Spirit that raised Jesus Christ from the dead will come and give life to the dead dreams here. God, I pray that you will start small And let these people start with simple obedience, but that they will dream big for the glory of God. And that your vision, your greater vision for our lives will be ignited in a way that will change the world forever. God, help us do it. Not be average. Let's follow Jesus and be greater. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.